A trusted brother with dark visions turns deadly, leaving a family shattered. A respected doctor's marriage turns sinister, ending in a chilling confrontation in paradise. And in Australia, a young mother's desperate pleas go unheard until it's tragically too late. Each horrifying case exposes the hidden darkness lurking behind closed doors, betrayal, obsession, and violence in places you would least expect. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the DARKLIVITY podcast. I'm your host, Kimberlea, and I'm here with my co-host, my partner in crime stories, Jonathan.
Hi. DARKLIVITY is the dark downward slope into the degradation of the human mind and the consequences that such darkness brings to light.
Have you heard of those women who compete by calling out their husband's names? And whichever one is the most creative, they get, this is a real thing. Rob! I think that's the one that won last time. I think I need to be in that. Don't you think? You could hear me from a mile away.
I sure can.
Irving! But now that we've scared off most of the people that have never been here before, in today's episode, we are doing another, what we're calling our new series, Real-Time True Crime. And these are mini deep dives into 3 new cases or that are back in the media because they are unfolding and have updates. And they are not unsolved per se, because we know that you like closure, but they are cases that you may have never heard of yet, or you may want to keep following. So don't forget to subscribe, turn the notification bell on so you don't miss an update. Also, FYI, everything in this video is alleged if the case is ongoing and the information is gathered online from various sources. So let's jump in to the very first case. A 911 call came in to the Princeton Township Police Department in New Jersey at 11:16 p.m. on February 22nd of 2025. The operator's voice asked 911, "What's your emergency?" And a man's voice, oddly calm yet undeniably unsettling, responded, "There's a fire and a dead body." "What's the address, sir?" 621 Michelle Muse Apartments in Princeton. The dispatcher pressed the man urgently. They said, "Who's dead, sir? Do you know the person?" He replied flatly, "It's my brother, Joseph Hertgen. He's been dead for about 30 to 40 minutes. His voice was devoid of emotion, and the operator asked, "How did he die?" And the caller responded coldly, "I'm not going to go into more details right now." But before hanging up, the caller also let the dispatcher know that there was a fire in the apartment and that he was still inside alone with his deceased brother. Help was now on the way, but the dispatcher tried to keep the man on the phone by asking if there were any weapons involved in the incident, to which he replied, "Like I said, I am not going into any more details."
We like to paint a vivid picture of where these crimes take place, and the location provided by the caller was quite surprising. These were luxury condos. They were individually owned and sell for upwards of $1 million to over $3 million.
Yeah, these were over-the-top luxury. I took a virtual tour of one of them, and the site explained that each one offered top-quality design inside and out with terraces and balconies, exquisite promenades, landscaped courtyards, private garage access, dramatic 10-foot ceilings, elegant wood paneling in the elevators, and gas fireplaces with marble. They even had custom California closets. I think you get the picture. And this was not an area known for crime. This was a very upscale area with a lot of young professionals because it's right by Princeton University, only 1 minute away. So it was shocking when police received this call because they expected maybe a fire, some party favor related incidents, possibly a heart attack, something like that. But what they found inside the condo was absolutely more horrifying than they could have ever imagined.
As officers stepped up to the door of the luxury condo in Palmer Square, the man who had called 911 came out to speak with them, reiterating what he had told the 911 operator, that there was a dead body inside. As they were led through the door, they were met with a gruesome sight of 26-year-old Joseph Hertgen lying lifeless on the floor of the dining area, a massive pool of blood spreading around his body. Joseph had suffered extreme blunt force trauma to the back of his head, his chest viciously slashed open. Most horrifyingly were the lacerations to his right eye, and his right eyeball was missing.
I could not believe that when I was reading the affidavit, but it was just so horrific. And we're not trying to dramatize any of this. I'm actually pulling this information right from an officer's account. And it went on to explain that they observed a cup of what they believed to be blood, along with blood-smeared eating utensils and a blood-smeared plate on the dining room table next to Joseph's body. So what we can say is just put two and two together. The eyeball was missing, and it appeared it had been removed in an unspeakable act and then consumed. This was all very chilling. Attempted cannibalism. They were not expecting this and had never seen anything like it before. They called it gruesome and way overboard.
Adding another heartbreaking detail, Joseph's cat was also found deceased. The poor thing was found partially burned on an ottoman in the living room. The cat appeared to have sustained blunt force injuries as well. There was a golf club lying on the floor near Joseph's body and blood on the head of the club. As they questioned the man who called 911, they learned he was 31-year-old Matthew Hertgen, Joseph's older brother.
And just like he was in the 911 call, he was eerily composed at the scene. But officers observed fresh scratches on both of Matthew's hands, and when they asked him how and when he sustained those injuries, Matthew said that he went into a fit of madness maybe like 40 minutes ago. Those were his exact words. So at this point, he was handcuffed and detained and put in a patrol car and transported to Princeton Police Headquarters. News outlets were quick to dub this the Princeton Preppy murder case, putting emphasis on the affluent setting and the brothers' all-American backgrounds. But who were these brothers? And what nightmare had unfolded behind these closed doors in this upscale Princeton neighborhood?
Matthew and Joseph Hertgen grew up pretty comfortably in Toms River, New Jersey, the kind of place with perfect lawns, families that really pushed for success, and this overall feeling of safety and privilege. Their dad, David Hertgen, was a well-respected CFO at a big tech company called Y-Line Networks, and their mom, Deborah, was all in when it came to raising her three boys. Always at their soccer games and every single school event. The oldest was David Jr., born in 1990, then came Matthew in 1993, who was like the classic big brother to the youngest Joseph, who was born in 1997. Matthew had it all. He was popular, talented, protective, and a total star at the Toms River North High School, both in classroom and on the varsity soccer team. Joseph wasn't far behind either. He was gifted, ambitious, and just as driven. Honestly, all three of them were high achievers. People always said the brothers were super close, and they all ended up at really good schools too. Matthew graduated from Wesleyan University in 2014, and Joseph went on to the University of Michigan, finishing in 2020. Joseph especially stood out. He was recognized 3 times as an academic All-Big Ten honoree in soccer.
After college, the two youngest brothers, Matthew and Joseph, found themselves back together, sharing an apartment at the Michelle Muse Apartments in the heart of upscale Princeton. Joseph thrived at his finance job at Locust Point Capital, while Matthew appeared to be struggling, seemingly directionless and increasingly withdrawn over time. But beneath the veneer of suburban success and familiar harmony, something darker was brewing, something that began subtly, almost invisibly, but soon it grew into a darkness that no one could ignore. Because around 2019, something in Matthew began to shift dramatically. Friends and family noticed that he was withdrawing, he was becoming isolated, and he seemed troubled.
Matthew started having these really terrifying visions, super vivid hallucinations, and full-on paranoia. His brothers saw what he was going through and really tried to be there for him. Joseph, in particular, felt this huge responsibility to help Matthew keep things together day to day, and that's when he agreed to move in with him again.
Now, Matthew's Facebook post got increasingly concerning. It started with drawings and then weird poems, like captions like this, for example. Here's one from June 13th of 2023. It's a very weird drawing that could be many things. You tell me what you think it might be in the comments. I have the advantage of knowing what his other drawings look like following this one. So to me, it appeared to be maybe an underground tunnel of some kind into a different universe. It's very colorful and almost vibrating. And his caption read, quote, "How many dwellings are there in the heart of the sea? How many springs are there at the fountainhead of the deer? Or how many streams are above the firmament? Or which are exits of hell? Or which are the entrances of paradise?" End quote. It's interesting. It's almost like he is traveling to these other places in his mind, and he has a lot of questions. But I think people probably chalk this up to maybe being existential or creative, because a lot of people post weird things on Facebook.
Kind of reminds me of what sort of one's energetic aura, like transcending to another place, would resemble.
Exactly. It's like he's going somewhere, whether that's real, like he's actually traveling in his brain, or whether he feels like he's changing. But at this point, I don't think people were as concerned because this was like the first time he started drawing this stuff.
But then on September 15th of 2023, he posted another picture. This one was more detailed, which is probably why you said, Kimber, that it looked like a portal to another world. This time, it's way more colorful, and it does look like it's almost electric, like it has frequency and it's moving.
Yeah, like energy is going into this hole in the universe, and then there's like these veins coming from it that are really intense, like an intense force is coming out of it.
It's hard to suggest what it was being in that time that he drew it, but considering what we know now, it's almost as if it's a self-portrait of himself changing.
Yeah, it could be. We don't know. We won't ever know, right? Unless he were to tell us. But I still don't think that anyone was really too worried from the outside looking in. Who knows? Art is weird, right? I mean, it's different. Sometimes we get really creative and maybe it's vague and you're not supposed to know what it is.
Art is up to interpretation.
Exactly. But behind closed doors, his brothers and family knew that Matthew was not okay. He was severely unwell, actually, possibly suffering from psychosis. Yet the urgency of the situation wasn't fully grasped at the time. His brothers tried to be vigilant, though. They tried to be around him to make sure they were paying attention to him and not leaving him alone too long to sit with his own thoughts. I don't think they thought that he would hurt them, though. I think that they were buying time until they could figure out how to truly help him. But things only got worse.
And in 2024, his social media presence got even more concerning.
And this is just what we can see online. We have no idea what he was like in person.
Exactly. But then on March 2nd, he shared another piece of art. This time it was a painting, even more creative, but still sticking to that same kind of concept. It looked like it could have been a black hole, or maybe a wormhole, or even a portal to another universe.
Maybe to the universe in his mind, where he was slowly becoming less of himself and more of whatever that confusion is that's painted on that canvas. It's just a bunch of wild squigglies at this point coming from what looks like an energy source. It's definitely scary when coupled with the poem he wrote.
And it reads, "Why does the moonlight once again burn my skin? Was that you again? In my dreams? Who are you? Why do you haunt me? Why won't you let me find solace? Where are you leading me? In what dark alleyway will we lock eyes this time? On which empty city street will we cross paths this time? In what desolate basement will we find ourselves this time? Why am I powerless in your presence? What is this that I am feeling? Is it desire? Is it love? Is it shame? Is it fear? Am I even in your presence? Are you there? Are you not there? Is that your voice, or is that my voice? Was that the work of my hands, or was that the work of your hands? Do you like to watch me suffer? Do you like to crush me with pain? Do you like to hear me moan? Now, what is it that you want me to do this time? Do you want me to burn everything down? Must I sacrifice everything at your altar? Is there not enough ashes already? Have I not spent enough time in the furnace? In your furnace? What is that I hear you saying? That there must be nothing left of me? Is that really you speaking? Or is it the spirit?"
Wow. I mean, if this was not true crime and this was just poetry or songwriting, I think both of us who have personal experience writing songs and singing, and might think that those are really powerful, poetic lyrics. You know, they're eerie, they're deep, they're mysterious, and they are well written. But this was a man that was truly in pain. He was asking so many questions throughout this entire poem. He has so many questions, and you can tell that he's struggling to understand what he's feeling and even what he's hearing, because it sounds like he's actually hearing audible voices. And even more terrifying is when he asked, was it the work of your hands or his hands? It's like something is taking over and he can't tell where he ends and they begin. He's becoming one with someone or something evil. That's all I could think of when I was hearing that. And he posted a selfie that day too. It looked like he took it in front of a bunch of mirrors, which is poetic because it's like fragments of himself. Also note that he's clean shaven in this photo. And he made this his profile picture after that as well. But let's move closer to present day. Just a few months before the tragedy, Matt Hertgen made another post on September 6th of 2024, and it read, quote, What have you created? Why have you created it? Who are you trying to strangle? And what God are you serving? I can see the knives sharpening. I can hear the arrows whizzing. I can feel my heart beating. But can he? Someone sits alone in that room where the walls shake. He still has a pulse. Blood still flows through his veins, but something is wrapped around him, squeezing him, choking him, suffocating him. Tightly wound around his head, fastened deep in his throat. Blood oozes out of his eyes. His ears are sparking. His face vibrates. He convulses, and he doesn't stop. He's lost. He's asleep. He's dead. His spirit has been crucified. His agony doesn't end. His pains only get worse. The waves make him sicker. He can barely keep his eyes open, but knows what appears when he closes them. Someone sits alone in that room, the room where the fountain is. He's hunched over. The fountainhead is aimed at his face. Waters erupt from the spout on him. The pressure in his head is unbearable. The fountain shakes. His brain shakes. And so does the floor under his feet. He is drunk on the waters. He is drowning. He can barely breathe. He won't eat a thing. His body is surrounded by fires. The fires are blazing inside of him. He's combusting into nothing. His eyes redden by the minute. Creases form on his forehead. He keeps his mouth tightly closed, but knows what happens when he opens it. Someone sits alone in that room where the God is. He's suffering terribly, but knows what it means to fall in love. End quote. Again, it's very poetic, but at the same time, it's very creepy. 16 people actually shared that. And there were a lot of reactions on this post. This is on Facebook. So there was like the angry faces, the crying ones, the shocked ones. But in just a few months, Matt's entire appearance would change. And so would his entire world. His family would too. And his brother Joseph would be dead. But I don't think this is what others have said that they think it is. I mean, it does sound violent, of course. We're hearing about choking and strangling and things like that. But I saw this as an internal struggle. Like something is taking over him and something is suffocating him and turning him off. You know, his own voice is being silenced. But I also thought this could be visions and those hallucinations. And I would guess schizophrenia. I'm not a doctor. I'm not really giving, a diagnosis. We have so little info, but we do know that these symptoms started in his late 20s, according to reports.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like he's having a severe internal struggle with one of his demons surfacing.
Yeah.
On February 21st at 1:15 p.m., just a day before that 911 call, Matt posted a photo on his Facebook. It looked like a selfie. He's lying on the floor, staring straight into the camera. His hair is longer and all messy, and his beard and mustache are totally overgrown. He honestly looks nothing like the Matthew his friends and family used to know, and right next to his head, in the photo, is a cat toy.
There was someone who found that exact cat toy on Amazon and posted a picture. It's like the Whisker City teaser, and it's laying right by his head, right before the cat's found deceased the next day. And I was sitting there thinking, why would he take this photo? I found his last post very interesting, though. It came on that same day, February 21st. It's an image of sort of the bat signal, but instead it's the R from Rough Riders, like DMX. And Dave Portnoy from Barstool Sports posted the same image just weeks before Matt did. And we know that Matt was an athlete his entire life, especially in college at Wesleyan. So it wouldn't have been surprising that he would be a fan of Dave and Barstool Sports. But funny enough, I was just listening to an episode of Lawyer You Know. If you listen to him, you might have caught this one. He mentioned and showed clips from a podcast with Dave where they were talking about the Karen Reed trial and showing that true crime, and Karen's case in particular, was now resonating with a broader audience that doesn't usually dedicate time in their podcast to talk about true crime because they're dedicated to talking about sports. But anyway, Matt posted this image that got 1 million views on Dave's X account weeks earlier. And with some digging, it seems to be an inside joke pertaining to a former employee of Barstool Sports named Rico Bosco. If y'all know anything about this, leave it in the comments. But John, I know you looked it up.
After looking into it a bit, I found out that Rico Bosco actually had a pretty solid following on his podcast. He called his fans Riders. And if you look closely, the RR in the Rough Riders logo kind of connects to that. If you glance at the logo quickly, it sort of looks like it could be R and B, which lines up with the whole RR Rough Riders thing. And to me, that RR or RB logo in the sky resembling that bat signal is a call to come home, because Rico Bosco had left that podcast. So now that RB bat signal is like, come home.
It's like Dave calling him back, because that's exactly what happened. And then all the little memes and stuff under the comment section were inside jokes that we don't really understand. But I'm sure a lot of sports fans do, who listen to Dave and understand his whole, concept of his podcast, as well as the people involved. So this was Matt's last post.
Yeah, no caption, no nothing, just the picture. And which leads me to believe that he was just a fan of the show and Rico Bosco, so he was showing support. Now, don't quote me. These are just my opinions.
Yeah, I mean, we'll never know unless we ask like the poems and everything else. We're just giving our opinions.
Because that image that Dave posted got millions of views and thousands upon thousands of shares, which including was him.
Yeah, I could see him just being a fan and posting it there. I don't know if there's any darker, deeper meanings, but you know what? The audience will know if there is, because a lot of you know more than we do about maybe things like pop culture. But what no one knew is that Matt hadn't been doing very well that week. And the day of Joseph's murder, their brother David had spent hours comforting Matt, attempting to soothe him as he was speaking about terrifying visions and his paranoia. David later described Matthew as distressed and despondent, haunted by delusions that only he could see, which makes sense, but doesn't mean that they're any less real to the person that's experiencing them. He went to the grocery store with David, and around 10 p.m. that night, David dropped Matt back off at the home he shared with Joseph. And David exchanged a brief but serious conversation with Joseph, cautioning him. He said, "Keep an eye on Matthew." Those were the last words that David would ever say to his youngest brother. And they hung heavily. They were tragically prophetic. Minutes later, he texted Joseph, reminding him urgently, "Call me if you need help." And Joseph reassuringly replied, "Will do."
Just pretty chilling in hindsight.
Yes, because it was such a normal response, because he was tragically unaware of what was about to happen. David also texted Matt right after Joseph, and he invited him on a hike the next day and told him, "Hang in there."
Less than an hour later, in the calm quiet of that Princeton apartment, everything just exploded into chaos. No one really knows for sure what exactly set Matthew off, but authorities think he had a severe psychotic break. Joseph was attacked with brutal force. Matthew hit him over and over with a golf club until the back of his head was severely fractured. And then it got even worse. Matthew grabbed a knife and slashed deep wounds across Joseph's chest and abdomen.
Sadly, when first responders arrived, things were outside of his body that should have been inside. That's the best way I can put it without getting too graphic. That's how intense these wounds were, which is just so heartbreaking. And we already explained the eye and the theory of what happened there, that it was consumed by Matt. And I can't even imagine thinking that and seeing that in that moment, because we think of police as like desensitized to this, but they're not.
Right. And surprisingly, neighbors never reported hearing screams or sounds of violence. In the quiet luxury of the Princeton condos, no one imagined such horror that could be unfolding so silently behind their walls. Matt had no criminal record aside from a drunk driving arrest that resulted in his license being suspended in 2017. He was a respected member of the community, and now he faces a first-degree murder charge and at least 30 years in prison. Matt's mental state rapidly deteriorated in custody, attempting to end himself mere days after his arrest, cementing that deep psychological turmoil that he was going through.
Family later painted a vivid picture of years-long battle with mental illness that he was going through, all leading tragically here. As investigators dug deeper, they confronted tough questions. Did Matthew know what he was doing? Could the family have prevented this? But of course, it's easy to ask these questions after the fact, and the family was already suffering so much. As Matt awaited his indictment, prosecutors remained determined to convict him of murder. Yet the question of his sanity was looming. Could he truly comprehend the magnitude of his actions during what he called a fit of madness? New Jersey law sets a high bar for legal insanity. The defendant must not understand the nature or wrongfulness of their acts. But Matthew's attorneys will most certainly have him undergo a psychiatric evaluation. He wore a self-harm prevention vest during a court appearance on February 27th. He only said hello and thank you to the judge, who indicted a grand jury to weigh in on the charges, and his family was not in court. It was after this that he actually attempted to harm himself in his jail cell.
On March 1st, about 100 grieving friends and family members of 27-year-old Joseph Hertgen filled the St. Luke Roman Catholic Church in Toms River for his funeral. His oldest brother David, who is a minor league golfer who graduated from Coastal Carolina University with a bachelor's degree in finance, delivered an emotional eulogy, which included memories about his brother beating him in ping pong all the time and how much they both loved the Yankees. He also described his youngest brother's competitive side, which he said propelled him toward success in everything. He said Joe's goals were set, and Joe figured out a way to achieve those goals.
David also said that Joseph was a friend to all and had a smile that really was like sunshine and warmth and comfort that radiated from him, adding, "There's not a person on earth that I would be prouder to call my brother. His death was a tremendous loss that came too soon." The picture of David and his father, they were practically holding up his crying mother, and that it was so sad for me to see.
It was probably not by accident that there was no mention of Matthew, the alleged killer, also Joseph's and David's own brother, during the funeral. And David said there's quite a bit of pain, anger, emptiness, sadness, and confusion. I'm sure many of you here feel the same way. We lost a great man and a far better person all too soon.
Matt's very next court hearing will be on May 1st, and we will keep you posted on our community tab. But really quickly, I wanted to let you know we will be adding some membership options to both YouTube and Patreon for those of you that can't get enough of our stories and do want to know more current true crime and things like that. This was by request. You have all asked what you can do to support us and also wanted us to create an exclusive place for bonus content.
So we'll let you know when it launches.
And maybe you can give us some suggestions in the comments of like different emojis you would want to see, different sayings from the show that maybe you like, that you've heard us say, things like that. So now let's go on to the very next story. I want you to imagine that you're waking up in your own bed, in your own home, a place where you're supposed to feel safe. You hear a noise. It's something out of place and your heart beats faster, but you convince yourself it's nothing. Maybe it's the wind or the building settling, but then you see it, a shadow, movement, someone who definitely shouldn't be there. And your heart sinks because this isn't just anyone. It's someone that you've spent years trying to escape. And he's back.
On March 25th, 2022 at 10:39 p.m., a frantic call came through to 000, Australia's emergency line. A young mother, just 21 years old, was pleading desperately for help. She said someone had broken into her home and was coming at her with a knife. In the background, a male voice yelled angrily, "Hang up, Mackenzie." Her voice was shaking with panic. She screamed, "No, stay away from me. Leave." And then there was silence.
Just minutes later, Newcastle police arrived at the Mayfield apartments, a scene so horrific that it would haunt even seasoned officers. It was like something out of a horror movie. There was blood spatter all down the hallway, smeared on the walls, and pooling around the young woman lying motionless on the ground outside. Mackenzie Anderson had been stabbed multiple times, with her 1-year-old son nearby covered in blood but unharmed. Then, Mackenzie's longtime on-again, off-again boyfriend, Tyrone Thompson, stood with blood all over him, and he was frantically shouting, "Help me! She's dead!" Officers rushed to Mackenzie's side, desperately checking for signs of life, and miraculously, she was still breathing. But within just mere minutes, she was beyond saving.
Tyrone, meanwhile, was hysterical and totally drawing attention to himself, yelling, "My hand, I'm bleeding out," even though the cut on his hand was nothing compared to the horror Mackenzie had gone through. It became all he could focus on. While paramedics were fighting to save her life, Tyrone was there, dramatically begging for medical attention for himself. The police, completely disgusted and shaken, took him into custody, just stunned at how something so brutal could happen so fast. Especially in a place Mackenzie had worked so hard to keep safe.
Ultimately, it was revealed that Mackenzie sustained an incomprehensible 78 stab wounds, which we all know is extreme and what is deemed overkill. But before this tragedy occurred, who was Mackenzie Anderson? And sadly, how did she get here? Mackenzie was known affectionately by friends and family as Max. She was vibrant, outgoing, and fiercely protective of her young son, Eli, who was just a week from turning 2 years old at the time that she was killed.
Mackenzie was born and raised in Newcastle, New South Wales, and she was that friend you could always count on, always laughing, always making everyone around her feel welcome. She and her mom, Tabitha, were super close. Not a lot has been shared publicly about the details of their family life, but it seems like Tabitha raised Mackenzie as a single mom for a while, and then later got remarried and had a second child, a son, in 2014. So Mackenzie would have been around 13 at this time.
From Facebook photos, you can tell that Tabitha loved spending time with both of her children, and they would take vacations together. There are pictures of them in the United States with a caption on one of the photos that talked about how Mackenzie wanted so badly to visit IHOP. So Tabitha took her there on their vacation, and I thought that was really cute, being from the United States. And, that's not a big deal for us, but it would be for somebody else. There was especially this cute photo of Mackenzie enjoying her American IHOP breakfast. Tabitha is a dental hygienist with a prominent following on social media even before the tragedy. She enjoys educating other practitioners and even does international public speaking about dental care, as well as a podcast called Disrupting Dentistry. I was surprised when I saw Tabitha's photo because it looked like she could be Mackenzie's older sister.
Tabitha was supportive of her daughter when she got pregnant at 19 years old and had her baby boy Elijah, who went by Eli. Mackenzie was with the boy's father, Cale, at the time.
Right. Tyrone was not Eli's father, and it seemed like Mackenzie and Cale were doing the best they could as young new parents. When she found out she was pregnant, she was so happy. You could tell she adored her son. He was her world. She referred to him as her love bug and her caterpillar.
When Eli was born, Mackenzie noticed right away that something wasn't right. He had a cleft palate. He couldn't drink from a bottle properly, and he really struggled to keep milk down. Mackenzie ended up being super open about their journey, sharing their experience to help other new parents to know what to look out for.
She even posted a picture inside of Eli's mouth, and you know what? I wasn't aware. Some people were commenting like, oh, this is really common. I didn't know. And I could see how Mackenzie liked to help other moms. And she was so proud to be a mama. Her Instagram was even Mama to Eli. That was the name she chose. And she would caption cute photos with words can't describe how much I love him.
But it wasn't long before things started to fall apart between Mackenzie and Cale, and she ended up raising Eli on her own as a single mom. Thankfully, she wasn't completely alone. She had her mom and stepdad by her side, and they had a 6-year-old of their own, Mackenzie's little brother. So at least she had a built-in support system around her.
And it was almost like he was a big brother to Eli. They would spend a lot of time playing together.
In March of 2021, little 11-month-old Eli had to go in for surgery to repair his cleft palate, and Mackenzie shared the whole journey on her Instagram. Thankfully, the surgery went really well, and she kept posting updates about his progress afterwards.
And on his first birthday, which was an Easter birthday, Mackenzie wrote a heartfelt caption talking about what it was like being Eli's mom. She said, quote, "Raising my son alone, I imagined it would be double the work, double the stress, double the tears, but it has definitely been far from that by having my little village to raise Eli. I'm so grateful for you two, and so glad you guys are Eli's godmamas and are here along the long ride with us. Kisses," end quote. She was referring to her close friends Alice and Lily.
A lot of Mackenzie's friends really stepped up and became like second moms to Eli, but soon there was also a new man in her life, Tyrone Thompson. They met in 2020, and by March of 2021, right around the time Eli was about to turn 1, Mackenzie started posting videos of Eli laughing and playing with Tyrone.
They looked so happy. Exactly what a highlight reel is online, all about the good times. And Mackenzie was a typical 21-year-old, and I don't mean that in a rude way. I mean, she liked to dress up, to look pretty, to drink, to laugh, to dance, and go out with friends, and she liked attention. Most young people do, and that's what I mean by typical.
And there's really nothing wrong with that. If there's any time in life you can do that, it's in your 20s.
Exactly. That's the time in your life that you should be a little bit more selfish. You're learning new things. You're growing up. You're becoming more mature. You're getting that life experience. And I'm sure she had Eli's dad or her mom watching little Eli so that she could have some free time. Everybody needs that. However, she and Tyrone seemed to have more of an off again than on again relationship. For example, he wouldn't appear in many of her outings when she took pictures with all of her friends. And behind all the smiles, there was a darkness that no one saw.
She was stuck in a toxic relationship. caught up in a cycle of violence, making up, and then things only getting worse. What's even more chilling is that Tyrone's violent behavior didn't start with Mackenzie. By the time he was just 22, he had already had 6 different apprehended violence order, or AVOs, filed against him by different women, showing a clear, dangerous, and unpredictable pattern.
An AVO is like a restraining order here in the United States, just so people understand that. So before he even met Mackenzie, there were other women who have already put this pattern out there in reports. And before you judge Mackenzie, I want to point out that many women either don't know that their potential partner has orders like this, which is why so many people are calling for reforms and databases that women or men can search, or sometimes if they do know, they truly believe it was circumstantial and that it won't happen to them. It's sad, but it's true. However, if someone has exhibited violence in the past, chances are they will do it again.
Mackenzie had confided in her friends that Tyrone would constantly gaslight her, really mess with her head, and eventually things turned out physical. In fact, not long after they first started seeing each other in 2020, she was already seeing clear signs that Tyrone was capable of hurting her. So she made the decision to move, to get away from him and keep her son safe. She packed up and moved to Newcastle, and she even texted a friend saying, "He told me he's sorry and I should stop being dramatic and bringing it up. And he loves me and won't do it again. But he thinks he's moving with me, but he isn't."
So she was attempting to distance herself from him, but eventually he made his way back into her life. They usually do because they're very manipulative. And sadly, Mackenzie was in love with Tyrone. And that's something that I'm sure a lot of us know is not tangible. It's not like we can see it through her eyes, and that we get caught up in these feelings. And sometimes we want to roll our eyes at people and go like, how could you say you love this person after they've treated you badly?
I remember being young and in love and thinking, this is it for me. This is the love of my life.
Yeah, and I just rolled my eyes when you were saying that. And that's kind of what we all feel. But then we have to realize we've probably all been there before. And we don't take people's advice. Like your mom could say, don't date them. I know better. Or your big sister will be like, girl, I'm telling you, he's bad news. But we almost like chalk it up to like a challenge sometimes. Like I can change them.
I'll prove it.
Right. And that's sad, but it is true. It isn't truly easy to understand, and our feelings can definitely get in the way of our rational thoughts. And let's have some grace, because Mackenzie was so young. We're talking about a 19-year-old when they met. This isn't someone with a lot of life experience.
Mackenzie went through 2 years of violent outbursts, constant intimidation, and those same old empty apologies. But after one especially brutal attack in 2021, Tyrone finally got sentenced to 10 months in jail. Though he ended up serving only 5 months. Even behind bars, his obsession with her didn't stop. In this really creepy move, he somehow managed to set his Facebook profile picture to a photo of Mackenzie's baby Eli. Like he was making this twisted statement about still having control and focusing on what mattered most to her. His whole profile was just filled with pictures of him and Eli.
Yeah, it was really disturbing because like his entire profile that I saw on Instagram was all of Eli and him. And those 5 months were 5 months of peace for Mackenzie. She was slowly reclaiming her life. She was going out with friends. She was feeling liberated, having fun, dressing up, and she was meeting people. And eventually she even fell in love again, sharing photos of her and her new boyfriend kissing and hanging out together as early as January of 2022. It's something that I'm sure would have upset Tyrone if and when he saw it. And I'm sure he would see it as soon as he got out of jail, or maybe before, since it seems like he had access to the internet behind bars, unless he was just talking to someone who was changing things and accessing his Facebook and Instagram for him. But he was active on social media like many people his age were. And there was a picture of the new guy kissing Mackenzie and another one with the song Falling in Love by Montel Fish playing in the background, and a close-up of the two of them embracing with the song When I R.I.P. by Labyrinth, which seems eerily foreshadowing looking back. But then a day before Tyrone was released, Mackenzie shared a picture of a photo strip of her and her new boyfriend again with the song Falling in Love by Montel Fish. So imagine seeing all that. Like he can see the songs Falling in Love, they're kissing, there's a new man, he's been in jail. It's a lot to think about.
Tyrone probably saw a lot of things he didn't like when he got out of jail. For instance, Mackenzie bravely began sharing her DV story on TikTok with emotional pleas to inspire others to speak out. She created posts like this one where she put up a video with her and Tyrone dancing and looking happy in the past. It read, "Why did you and blank end? You both look so happy." And then the video would switch to pictures of her with black eyes and bruises all over her face.
Which we can't show you here without blurring because it's that bad. But it's crazy to think that that same year, there were videos of Tyrone and Eli laughing together, Tyrone pushing him on a swing, running in the park with him. So hard to imagine the other side of this man, this monster. Just about a month after this picture was taken of the three of them, Tyrone would attack Mackenzie, and that would land him in jail for that 10 months that changed to 5 months.
Mackenzie had felt safe while Tyrone was locked up, but that didn't last. He got out on March 9th of 2022, released on parole. There were strict conditions. He wasn't allowed to make contact with Mackenzie, and he was banned from drinking alcohol. But within just 24 hours of getting out, he already broke the restraining order. He called Mackenzie right away and told her straight up that he was coming for her and Eli, making it clear that he wasn't wasting any time to regain control. She kept telling her friends over and over, "I think he's going to kill me." But even with all her warnings, the system kept failing her.
And I know that you're tired of hearing this over and over again, but we have to keep talking about it because it hasn't stopped. I just did a case on my main channel of a mother of 4 who was murdered at the hands of her husband, and that should be shocking. But it's so common that I almost feel like people are desensitized after hearing it over and over again, and that might be a problem.
That's right. This all actually went down back in 2022, but we're talking about it now because there's been an update. But before we get to that, let's count down to the tragedy. So on March 9th of 2022, Tyrone Thompson walked out of prison. Right after he called Mackenzie, she was absolutely terrified. She even took to social media and posted, "I'm okay. My ex Tyrone just got out of jail from what he did to me, and he's still being weird and harassing me. He couldn't last 24 hours. It was like a public cry of frustration and fear, just putting it all out there.
Yeah, and she did try blocking his messages, but Tyrone was relentless. He would use multiple accounts to contact her and to torment her. And over the next 2 weeks, he expanded his harassment beyond Mackenzie herself. He actually started messaging the ex-girlfriend of Mackenzie's new boyfriend. He was trying to gather information and maybe even intimidate them. And at one point, he told the ex-girlfriend, "I miss what the new boyfriend took from me." So what this is it's really him showing that Mackenzie was a possession.
On March 19th of 2022, things really took a turn that, in hindsight, put Mackenzie in a dangerous spot. She had a falling out with her new boyfriend, and it had nothing to do with Tyrone. But maybe feeling a bit vulnerable and just wanting to keep the peace, she ended up meeting with Tyrone. That same day, she sent a friend a photo of the two of them together, showing that they were hanging out and even heading over to his place on the Central Coast.
Now, it's unclear if Mackenzie was attempting to keep the peace out of fear, or maybe he had persuaded her with all of his reasons and his apologies. DV experts say that victims will often face the most danger when they're trying to leave, and we know that. In some cases, victims will reconcile or even maintain contact out of a really complex mix of fear, hope, and maybe thinking that they're going to change, or even they were being coerced. Mackenzie's choice to see him again likely stemmed from the intense pressure that he was putting on her, and maybe the desire to just calm the entire situation. That's a really common scenario in these toxic relationships. For the next 5 or 6 days, from March 19th to the 24th of 2022, Mackenzie and Tyrone were frequently together.
During this time, friends later shared that Mackenzie was really trying to handle Tyrone carefully, even though he had raised so many red flags before and there was still an active AVO. It seemed like she was hoping that by not provoking him, she could calm things down and avoiding setting him off. But sadly, this ended up giving Tyrone just the opening he needed to creep back into her daily life and keep a close watch on her. It gave him just enough control to start escalating things all over again.
Friday, March 25th of 2022, the final day of Mackenzie Anderson's life. It began with an uneasy calm that would quickly unravel. Mackenzie, her little boy Eli, Tyrone, and one of their male friends returned to Newcastle the day before on March 24th and ended up at Mackenzie's apartment in the suburb of Mayfield. The next day on March 25th, Tyrone and his male friend, we're going to call him Jack for clarity because we're going to keep talking about him, they purchased a bottle of vodka. even though Tyrone's parole explicitly forbade him from consuming alcohol. Now, this seemingly casual hangout was unfolding under a dark cloud of tension because Tyrone's behavior was growing increasingly erratic and possessive as the hours went on. Adding alcohol to this mix was a bad idea, and I'm not excusing his tendencies, but it seemed like it will escalate his issues even more when you add alcohol to the mix.
And as the evening went on, Tyrone's jealousy just kept building. At around 6:48 p.m., he actually used Mackenzie's phone to send a text to her recent ex-boyfriend, the one she had just broken up with a few days earlier. The message was taunting and confrontational, with Tyrone throwing in, "I'm bigger than you, LOL," basically challenging the guy and trying to assert his dominance.
Yeah, and to drive that point home, Tyrone also sent this young man pictures of himself inside Mackenzie's bedroom, as well as multiple phone calls, making it blatantly clear that he was with her, which is kind of like a slap in the face, like, I'm back, and there's nothing you can do about it. The ex-boyfriend was alarmed by these messages he kept getting, and he reached out to Mackenzie's mother, Tabitha, to let her know what was going on. By approximately 7:30 to 8 p.m., Tyrone's behavior was escalating once again. He even got into a shouting match over the phone with one of Mackenzie's friends. He was yelling so aggressively that it concerned everyone around them, even people in the apartment complex. And then his mood swung. He sought out Mackenzie's attention and her affection, and he was cuddling up to her, crying and professing how much he loved her and complaining that she didn't appreciate everything he had done for her. And I'm thinking, what? The bruises, the black eyes. But I'm sure they did have moments where he would at least pretend to be nice. But he's not a truly nice guy because he's also a monster that hurts people this way. So you kind of can't be both.
But this kind of emotional whiplash, flipping from rage to sudden remorseful affection, is classic DV behavior. It's usually meant to confuse the victim and pull them back in. Mackenzie tried to keep him calm, but you could tell that she was scared of how unstable he was. By 8:27 p.m., she had enough and asked Tyrone to please leave her apartment. Sensing things could get dangerous if she ended up alone with him, she quietly texted Jack, quote, "Don't leave me alone with him here, LOL," end quote.
Now, you may wonder why people put the LOL at the end of their text messages. I know I've done it myself.
My thought is to lessen the blow of the text message.
What does that mean?
To not make it as serious.
Right. Like you don't want to make it a big deal because maybe sometimes the victim imagines that they're creating the issues. Like they're blowing out of proportion, which is also because they have been gaslighted before. So they're like, oh, I don't really want to make it seem like, get him out of here. LOL. Like he needs to leave. But they were also masking the real fear that she was feeling, which again is not uncommon for victims to mask serious fear with nervous humor. Her friend Jack understood and stayed by her side.
About 40 minutes later, around 9:10 p.m., Tyrone's behavior started getting way more obvious. He went into the kitchen and began messing with the knives, even pulling out a big kitchen knife and setting it right on the counter. He didn't say anything threatening out loud, but his actions were loud enough on their own. Both Mackenzie and Jack definitely noticed. Then Tyrone leaned in and whispered to Mackenzie that he didn't like Jack being there, basically warning her that Jack's presence wasn't going to stop him. Realizing how dangerous things were getting, Mackenzie made the decision that Tyrone had to go. She gave Jack the signal to get him out of the apartment.
The two men left the unit together. They walked for a short while, but Tyrone was far from cooled off. Instead of leaving for good, he split away from Jack, taking a different route, and then he doubled back, now fixated on getting back to Mackenzie. He was willing to go to the extreme lengths to reach her, and by 10 p.m., Tyrone had returned to Mackenzie's residence, and this time, taking a covert approach. In a chilling act of intrusion, he used a ladder to climb up to her balcony of her second-floor apartment, and he gained entry through a sliding glass door. He re-entered the home uninvited, violating this place that should have been Mackenzie's safe space. At this point, Mackenzie was in her bedroom, possibly trying to rest, collect herself after the stressful evening, or even tend to her small son. She was unaware that Tyrone had just broken in.
And once inside, Tyrone grabbed Mackenzie's phone and he began sending text messages to Mackenzie's mother, Tabitha, from Mackenzie's phone.
Yeah, this was a bit confusing, but he was posing as Mackenzie or possibly as himself using her device, and he wrote messages like, "I'm with her. She wants me to talk to you," trying to engage Tabitha in conversation. He even attempted to call Tabitha multiple times from her daughter's phone.
It's not totally clear what Tyrone was trying to pull with these messages. Like maybe he was faking a reconciliation to throw Mackenzie's mom off, or maybe he just wanted to taunt her family by showing he was alone with Mackenzie despite the AVO. But either way, Tabitha picked up on it right away. She replied saying that she didn't want to talk to him and reminded Tyrone that he wasn't supposed to be in contact with her daughter at all. Basically, Mackenzie's mom was telling him to get out, but of course, he completely ignored her.
Mackenzie's mom was actually out of town at the time. She was away for her birthday with her young son, which made this even more worrisome for her that she was unable to be there for her daughter. And as these texts and calls were happening, Jack, who had earlier escorted Tyrone outside, became concerned, and he decided to return to check on Mackenzie. When he arrived back at the apartment, he once again confronted Tyrone and told him to leave. Now this time, Tyrone bolted from the apartment, but not without grabbing something first on his way out. He snatched Mackenzie's keys from inside the lock of her front door before fleeing the complex. Mackenzie was terrified, and she was desperate to keep Tyrone out. She shouted to her friend and her neighbors, "Get him! Take my keys off him!" Now Tyrone had her house keys, which meant he could potentially let himself back in through the locked front door, a fact that was not lost on Mackenzie.
At 10:39 p.m., just moments after Tyrone had taken off, Mackenzie grabbed her phone and called 000 to report what was going on.
Yeah, she told the officer, "My ex-boyfriend's broken in. I've woken up to him in my house, and I have an AVO on him." She was clearly trying to show the seriousness of what was going on. Panic can be heard in her voice, as she also reported, "He came at me with a knife," adding that he might still be armed because there was 2 knives that he had out and only one of them was still there. And now we're getting a lot more context to this 911 call. She sees that one knife is now missing. She's telling the operator that he may still be armed because that knife is gone. That should have alerted the operator of how imminent the danger really was.
This crucial detail that Tyrone had been wielding 2 knives and that one was unaccounted for was shared by Mackenzie as she tried to make the police understand just how urgent this situation was. In the background of one of her calls, you could even hear Tyrone shouting, "Hang up, Mackenzie," as he tried to stop her from getting help.
So now we know that that was Tyrone trying to get her off of the phone. And Mackenzie's heard yelling back, "No, stay away from me, stay away from me," and twice telling him to leave. These panicked emergency call recordings later became key evidence of Mackenzie's final pleas for help, capturing the unfolding nightmare in real time. Even as she was on the phone with police, Mackenzie took additional steps to try to save herself. Around 10:45 p.m., she texted a close girlfriend explaining the situation. She said, quote, "I've just woken up to Tyrone breaking in. He came at me with a knife. He's still a fucking freak," end quote. She was conveying her fear, her anger, and this also shows that she might have believed he had changed because she says he's still a fucking freak. Maybe she thought the jail had reformed him, but it doesn't seem like it.
She even reached out to Tyrone's mother, maybe hoping that someone in his family could step in and talk some sense into him. Mackenzie was honestly doing everything she possibly could. She called the police, warned her friends and family, just fighting to survive the night. Then at 10:48 p.m., she sent one more chilling text to Jack. "Tyrone's back." Tyrone had come back again, using the stolen keys to get back into her apartment. At that point, Mackenzie had nowhere left to run or hide. Her worst fear had come true. The moment that Jack saw that text, he sprinted back towards her place, knowing things had reached the most dangerous point yet.
As Jack raced back to help Mackenzie, neighbors in the apartment complex were already aware that something was horrifically wrong. Several neighbors later reported hearing sounds of a violent altercation. One neighbor recalled hearing a male voice shout, "Fuck yeah," very loudly during an argument. And then moments later, another neighbor saw a terrifying sight. Through a window, they spotted Mackenzie, and for about 10 to 12 seconds, she was pounding frantically on the glass with both of her fists, trying to break the window.
That makes me believe that he locked her in.
I think she was upstairs on her balcony at that point from what I was reading in the reports, because I can't visually see what they're talking about, but it seemed like she was trying to get out that balcony to yell and scream and get help. She looked terrified, the witness said. Mackenzie was trapped and fighting for her life while her young child was also in that house. This is just a glimpse of Mackenzie desperately attempting to flee, and it just gives you a sense of how cornered and frightened she was in her final moments.
By the time Jack arrived to Mackenzie's apartment, he got to the front door and things had already hit a deadly peak. He found the door jammed or locked, but with force, he managed to push it open just enough to get inside. What he saw was straight out of a nightmare. Mackenzie was lying on the ground in the doorway right there in the landing area, and Tyrone was standing over her, stabbing her over and over again with a knife.
I had no idea that someone actually witnessed this because there's another aspect to this case, which is what brought it back into the news this month. So you're going to hear about that.
Yes, and that friend would later tell police that Tyrone was completely silent as he plunged the knife into Mackenzie over and over.
Now, his silence is such a contrast from Mackenzie's earlier screams and the neighbors' accounts, and it really paints a picture of a cold, frenzied attack.
In total, Tyrone stabbed Mackenzie 78 times in a matter of minutes.
Yeah, the court documents later revealed that those 78 stab wounds were inflicted in just about 170 seconds, that's under 3 minutes. The sheer number of wounds, as one analysis noted, is nearly 4 dozen more than it takes to kill a person. It was just a very ferocious stabbing. And it was sustained, it didn't stop. It kept going. It wasn't a sudden loss of control, but prolonged. And it was later described as a frenzied act of DV.
At some point during or right after the stabbing, neighbors reported hearing more shouting from Tyrone. One neighbor described hearing a man's voice yelling, "Go on, stab me again, you dog," along with these loud, heavy thumping sounds coming from Mackenzie's unit.
Yeah, that was really odd that he was saying that and then hearing those noises.
This bizarre statement suggests that Tyrone might have been acting out a twisted scene. Maybe he was referring to the stab wound or the cut on his hand.
Right, and we will get into that, which he would later claim was from Mackenzie stabbing him. And in those moments, it's like he was almost daring this mortally wounded Mackenzie to fight back or mocking her attempts to even defend herself. Now, this was part of that other aspect of the case that I hinted at, self-defense. And we'll get into that in a moment. But the brutality did not stop at stabbing. Tyrone himself later admitted that while this attack was going on, he stomped or jumped on Mackenzie's head after stabbing her. This level of violence just shows an intent to destroy her, to maim her. And even the fact that he was doing this to her head and her face, that says a lot. That is why his initial claim of self-defense would be really without merit. There's no way he was merely defending himself against this woman.
There's no way. As Mackenzie was lying there bleeding out on the floor, her friend couldn't stop the attack in time. In those final critical moments before the police arrived, Tyrone showed absolutely zero remorse. According to what Jack later said, he even banged on the neighbor's door claiming that he had been stabbed, all while he was literally standing right next to Mackenzie's motionless body and her little son, who was also covered in blood.
Oh my God. When I heard this, I'm just like, he's trying to make himself look like the victim as Mackenzie's laying there dying. And that's just really chilling to see his mindset in that moment. It foreshadowed the excuses that he would soon give to the authorities because at 10:53 p.m., approximately 14 minutes after Mackenzie's first desperate call for help, police finally arrived on scene. Do I think it was too long? Yes, I do. That's only one of the issues in this case. And as we told you in the beginning, the first responders were met with a horrific sight in that corridor outside of Mackenzie's unit. She was found critically injured, unresponsive, and covered in blood from the dozens of stab wounds. And near her, Tyrone Thompson. He was yelling out to the officers, "Help me, she's dead." It was bizarre because the cops don't know what's happening. They don't know if Tyrone is an innocent bystander or the killer. And to think the killer himself is calling out for help while also pointing out the victim's lifeless condition, and he caused it, and that's just so callous.
Officers quickly moved to secure Tyrone and assess Mackenzie. They told him to be quiet so they could determine if Mackenzie was still breathing. She was for a few minutes, but their attempts to save her were futile. As police placed Tyrone under arrest, he began to bring attention to a wound he had on his right hand. He was bleeding from a slash across his fingers, an injury that he was very eager to have treated. He cried out to the officers, "I'm bleeding out everywhere, man. Can you help my blood pressure? I'm pissing out blood," complaining that he felt weak and numb.
All this is about him. In reality, his injury was not life-threatening. And later, medical examination found that while he had severed some tendons in his fingers, which are consistent from a cut from a sharp blade, no major arteries were cut and his vital signs were stable. It appeared what is known as a typical perpetrator injury in stabbing cases. The assailant's hand will slip down the blade, and they will get cut during a struggle. Even before leaving the scene, Tyrone Thompson started attempting to explain his actions to the authorities. Police formally cautioned him, reading him his rights at this point, but he just kept talking. He went into this unsolicited narrative. In his initial statement to this detective on the scene, he effectively made a confession wrapped in justification. He said, "We got into a heated argument and she had a fucking knife, and then I've literally grabbed the knife and I just fucking stabbed. That's what he blurted out. And then he said, "I just jumped on her head. That's all that happened." And I was like, "Sir, right. Are you mentally okay?" Clearly no.
Tyrone was already framing the scenario as if Mackenzie was the aggressor. He said she had a knife, and he simply took it from her and went on the attack. He emphasized the heated argument and mentioned that they argued about her mother harassing them, likely referring to Tabitha urging Mackenzie to keep away from him. Tyrone's story evolved slightly over the next few hours, but its core remained. He was asserting that Mackenzie armed herself first. Later at the hospital, Tyrone told a psychiatrist that Mackenzie grabbed a knife during an argument and that he got slashed trying to take it from her.
I think it's interesting that he said, "Her mom's harassing us." It's like, no, her mom's telling you to leave because you have a restraining order and you shouldn't be there and you're not supposed to be talking to her.
Right.
It's like, that's the way he's seeing it or framing it. Like, oh, we got in this heated argument because she was harassing us.
He's framing it that way.
He's weird. He's like delusional, but I don't even want to give him that because he's not. He knows exactly what he's doing.
Right. And what about the 78 stab wounds?
Exactly. Like, you did not have to, if that was really happening, he's bigger than her.
Right.
He could have ran away.
Yeah.
It was her house that he broke into.
Honestly.
He wasn't even supposed to be there.
To another doctor, he repeated that they had a heated fight in the bedroom while she had a knife, and that he wrestled it away from her and started stabbing her and stabbing her.
Throughout these retellings, Tyrone conveniently omitted his own actions, like sneaking in with the ladder, and focused on portraying himself as someone who reacted in the heat of the moment to her aggression. Investigators, of course, were highly skeptical. The physical evidence and the witness statements, they contradicted any legitimate self-defense claim. Mackenzie was found outside her apartment unit, suggesting that she had been trying to flee, and Tyrone had chased her down and continued stabbing even when she was on the ground. There were many post-mortem wounds to her body.
When building this case, prosecutors had to go through every single detail. In the agreed statement of facts that came out in the court later, it was noted that the Crown couldn't fully disprove the possibility that Mackenzie might have briefly held a knife at some point during the struggle. They also couldn't completely rule out that Tyrone's hand might have been cut while he was trying to disarm her.
Right, but this did not excuse Tyrone's actions by any means. It was just acknowledging that some aspects of his story, like maybe the knife being in her vicinity, couldn't be definitively ruled out. Even if Mackenzie had picked up a knife, though, in self-defense, she was trying to ward him off. He broke in. So Tyrone's response was so savage that it far exceeded any reasonable force. By the end of that night, Tyrone Thompson was formally charged and in police custody. Authorities charged him with Mackenzie Anderson's murder, with additional charges for entering a dwelling with intent for a break-in and for breaching the apprehended DV order. He was held behind bars pending his trial. There would be no bail for someone accused of such a heinous act, and now Mackenzie's family had to be notified. Tabitha, like we told you, was out of town celebrating her birthday when she got the call. It was 2 a.m., and the police officer on the other line told her the news that would actually bring her to her knees. She had just toasted to her marvelous life that day and how lucky she felt. And it just shows you how fast our lives can change.
So instead of us retelling it, let's play a clip from Tabitha's podcast where she shares what she went through. She actually starts telling everyone to try really hard not to judge others. And honestly, that's a pretty important message, not just here, but in so many situations. She really wants people to understand that you never truly know what someone is dealing with behind closed doors. So let's listen to what she has to say.
Don't judge. Try and be as understanding as you can. And it is our job to be that cheerleader on the side. We just don't know what's happening behind the smile of someone. And I'll give you an example of this. When we found out that my daughter had died, I was in a hotel room by myself at 2:00 in the morning with my son when I got the phone call. And I didn't go back to sleep. I stayed awake all night. And in the morning, I decided that I wouldn't tell him what had happened, that I would put him on the plane and get him home after the 3-hour drive and tell him in the safety of the house. So that morning, I took myself to the airport and I smiled at the lady when we checked in. And I bought him some Lego at the shop to try and distract him. And I smiled at the lady as I got on the plane and said, "Thank you for taking me to the seat." And I thanked her for my glass of water. And I kept all the tears inside because I had to make sure this 8-year-old sitting next to me felt safe and didn't suspect what was going on. And he always expects his mum to be smiling. So I had to pull that smile off. Meanwhile, inside, I'd never felt more broken in my life. And it made me realize when I was sitting on that plane and I was looking out the window while my son was playing his Nintendo, that you actually don't know what's happening in someone's life. And sometimes they can be smiling really bright and their whole world has just fallen apart. And so just try and be kind. I think that's the biggest thing, is be kind to everyone you meet, because they won't always show you how much they're hurting or how much their world is falling apart. And I'm someone that's a pretty stoic person on the outside and doesn't give much away. But you can be having the worst day of your whole entire life.
So because she is a dental hygienist, she's also speaking about not knowing that a patient may be dealing with something so heartbreaking. So just be kind. And this message extends to so many different instances, like you said, because you just never know. Here's this mom who has been up all night trying to hold back her complete knee-buckling sadness for her son's sake. He just lost his big sister. He was on this lovely vacation, and she didn't want it to end with horrific news. She wanted him to be safe at home in a comfortable place when she told him, and she could calmly explain what happened. But unfortunately for her, the trauma only compounded as soon as they stepped into the airport, because all of the news channels were just blasting Mackenzie's picture, as well as her full name on every TV screen that she saw when she was walking to her gate. She didn't even have a chance to talk to her own family, so how devastating is that? And now she advocates for the media not to broadcast images and names for at least 24 to 48 hours after the family has been notified. And there's a petition that I signed online. And if you want to, I'm going to leave it below if you feel compelled to sign it as well.
She explained that she was just in total shock, trying to process what she had been told that night, that her daughter was gone. As she made her way back to Sydney, her mind was spinning, thinking over and over about what she could have done differently to stop this from happening. But then, the even heavier thoughts hit her. How was she going to tell her son that his sister had died? How was she going to tell the rest of her family? And in the middle of all that heartbreak, she kept asking herself, how am I going to survive this?
It's definitely a lot for one person to go through, and no parent should have to witness their child leaving this earth before them, especially like that. The police made a statement about Mackenzie's murder to the public, and this is what they said.
Shortly after 10:42 p.m. last night, police were called to a domestic in Crevett Street at Mayfield. Upon arrival, they located a 21-year-old female laying on a landing outside of a unit suffering significant injuries. There was also present a 22-year-old male. Police have rendered assistance. That lady unfortunately passed away. I spent the last 20 minutes or so viewing the body-worn footage. It was a horrendous scene, horrendous. There was also a 3-year-old child present at that location. The child was located covered in blood, but it appears, thankfully, that child is not injured and that child is being cared for by relatives.
So you probably remember him saying that there was a 3-year-old found in the home, but actually he was almost 2 at that time, and you might be wondering what happened to Mackenzie's son Eli. He was bloody, but unharmed when they found him. He was immediately taken in by Mackenzie's mom, and he probably was too little to understand what had happened, but he definitely realized his mom wasn't there anymore.
I was bawling my eyes out looking at the videos of him and Mackenzie, and her mom said that they had photos of Mackenzie around the house, and they would light a candle next to them every day, and at times Eli would actually pick up one of the photos and just sit with it. And that just broke my freaking heart, seriously. And Tabitha said there's this upside of him only being 2 years old because he won't remember the trauma, but he also won't know his mom and how much that she really adored him. And Tabitha does worry about him in the future when, he goes on the internet and he sees things about his mom, or even when there's Mother's Day at school and he realizes he doesn't have a mom. And that's really tough. And it is true, like all of those details are all over the internet for him to stumble upon one day. She also said that sometimes he does really cute things or he'll pass a milestone, and Tabitha will instinctually, and this has happened to me and probably all of you who have lost someone, she'll instinctively pick up the phone to tell Mackenzie and then realize she's not here. And that's sad. Tabitha says that hole and that emptiness will never go away.
After Mackenzie's murder, her family held a memorial service for her near the beach. One of her friends looked at Tabitha and said, "This is really beautiful." Tabitha responded with, "This should have been her wedding."
That's right. She's never going to experience those special moments. And Tabitha knows she'll never get her daughter back. So the next best thing, she said, is to fight for other women like her daughter.
As for Tyrone's family, his dad said he actually spoke to him just 2 hours before he went to hang out with Mackenzie, and Tyrone told him, "We're fine and dandy together." So his dad told the media that it's a total mystery to him what happened. He said, "There's nothing I can say to Miss Anderson's family. Words can't describe what we're going through. I'm shattered for them and so sorry for their loss."
But I find it hard to believe that they don't have a clue how this could have happened.
Tyrone was just in jail.
Exactly. But even his brother Aiden said when he spoke to the media that he only found out about Mackenzie's death and his brother's alleged involvement when a friend shared a post on Facebook. And it was surprising because he said all their friends were telling him that they were reconciling and rekindling their relationship. But many of her close friends said they tried to tell her to focus on herself and her son and not go back to him. She insisted that she was in love with Tyrone. One of her friends actually said that Mackenzie may have held on, when she was on the floor still alive, because she was holding out to make sure that her baby was going to be okay because he was her world. She was such a great mom and that he changed everything for her. It did seem like she was a great mom. And I know some of you may be thinking, well, if she loved her son so much, she wouldn't have gone near Tyrone ever again. I hear this all the time. When I do DV videos, I hear people say this stuff. Some may even blame Mackenzie for her own murder, but I don't. Tyrone killed her. His actions did this. He chose this.
After Mackenzie's murder, it caused this huge nationwide outrage and really sparked conversations about Australia's crisis with DV. Tabitha became super outspoken, pushing hard for reforms like electronic monitoring for offenders, tougher penalties for breaching restraining orders, and actual systemic changes to really protect women. At all the vigils and rallies, people wore purple, held candles, and demanded answers from authorities. Mackenzie's life and the way that she had died hit so many people deeply, especially women who feel like the systems keep failing them. Friends, family, and even strangers came by Mackenzie's apartment, leaving flowers, candles, photos, and even a teddy bear for her little boy. It turned the whole place into a memorial.
Many of her friends, especially her friend Jade, posted tributes on TikTok showcasing the memories that they shared together and how much Mackenzie would truly be missed. But they also wanted to spread awareness of the danger of DV. One video had the caption, "The night I met you thinking that we would be friends forever, but heaven couldn't wait for you." She wrote, "It is because her ex that her son will have to grow up without a mother. It is because of her ex that her mother lost her only daughter. It's because of her ex that her little brother lost his big sister. It's because of her ex that she lived in fear every time he was released from jail. It's because of her ex that myself and all of her other friends can't sleep at night. He deserves life in jail, and laws need to change."
Her mom also shared these really sweet pictures of Mackenzie as a little kid that popped up on her Facebook memories, and she said, "We miss her so much." Her friends really stepped up for Eli too. They basically became like second moms to him, making sure he never forgets Mackenzie. They even posted updates about how he's doing and share pictures of all his little milestones, telling Mackenzie not to worry because they're taking good care of him.
Those were the videos I was also tearing up with because he's growing up. He's growing up without his mom, and all of her friends are rallying around him and making sure to take time to bring him to the beach and bring him to the park. It was really sad. And Tabitha said that we need more of these types of cases to be reported on, and that Mackenzie's murder received a lot of attention, probably because of her appearance and also because of the images that she shared online. There was a lot to showcase, so the media ran with it. But it really upset her that an Indigenous woman had died a couple weeks before Mackenzie, and so did an Asian woman just a week afterward, and both of their cases didn't receive as much attention compared to Mackenzie's. She said that she didn't want another woman and another child to be without their parents. She actually channeled her grief into action and launched They Are Our Daughters. And this is a website and podcast that's dedicated to calling for action on DV cases. She wants things like stronger parole, bail restrictions, and nationwide education on coercive control so that victims and survivors across the country know what the laws mean for their safety.
She's also pushing for mandatory counseling and rehab programs for offenders. She said it's not just reactive measures that we need, but preventive ones too. Because if we really want to change, we need to get to the root of the problem. And she shared this moment from the night that Mackenzie was murdered. Her partner said to her, "I can't believe this has happened." And she turned back to him and said, "Believe it, this happens every week. We've now just become a part of it."
And that's really sad, but it's also true. I told you that we've almost become desensitized, and many people think, it's disrespectful when there's a shirt that says like the husband did it. It's almost like a joke at this point. But with the statistics the way that they are, intimate partner violence is staggering. So it's not for nothing that police will look at the partner first when a woman dies. Now, Tyrone Thompson's first court appearances were back in 2022, where the charges were formally laid out. And from the onset, he intended to fight this murder charge. He entered a plea of not guilty and indicated that he would argue he acted in self-defense. But given the evidence, the stand frustrated Mackenzie's family and surprised the public. But under the law, Tyrone was entitled to his day in court. And this began what Mackenzie's mother referred to as a long and painful journey through the justice system.
The case eventually made its way up to the New South Wales Supreme Court, since they handle the really serious crimes. But the pretrial stuff dragged on for years, delayed by all sorts of things, probably COVID, backlog in courts, legal moves from Tyrone's defense, and all the forensic work. At one point, Tyrone himself actually got mad about the delays. There's this ABC report that he's quoted in saying how he's upset about how it took 3 years just to get to trial, which felt so ironic to Mackenzie's loved ones since they'd been stuck waiting in agony for justice all that time.
So this brings us up to speed on why this case was back in the media. As a trial date approached in early 2025, prosecutors and the family were preparing for an emotional court battle. The trial was scheduled to begin this month in April of 2025, almost 3 years after the murder. But in a stunning 11th hour twist, Tyrone Thompson's stance shifted. On March 31st of 2025, just days before jury selection, he changed his plea to guilty for the murder of Mackenzie Anderson. This was very unexpected. Everyone was caught off guard. For 3 years, he had maintained his innocence, at least legally speaking, and he stuck to the self-defense claim. And now he was finally admitting the truth. The guilty plea meant there would be no trial. In open court, Tyrone formally admitted that he had murdered Mackenzie as charged. The charge was categorized as DV-related murder, and that reflected the nature of their relationship. With this plea, many of the grisly details that were set to be argued at trial became part of the uncontested facts. And an agreed statement of facts was given to the court, outlining the evidence and the events, much of which we have told you in this video. Tyrone signed the statement of facts, accepting the narrative of how the crime was perpetrated.
For Mackenzie's family, that last-minute plea was a mix of relief and heartbreak. It saved them from having to go through the trauma of a full trial. But Tabitha said, "While we are relieved that our family and friends will be spared the further trauma of a trial, this process is far from over." Now, the case has moved to the sentencing phase, and it's up to the judge to weigh all the aggravating factors to the crime against anything Tyrone's defense might try to argue in his favor. The sentencing hearing got scheduled for later this month in April of 2025.
In New South Wales, murder carries a maximum penalty of life imprisonment. And given the extreme brutality and the fact that this was a DV murder and breach of court orders, the expectation is that Tyrone is going to receive a very lengthy prison term, possibly decades, if not life. Tabitha and her family prepared victim impact statements to present at that hearing, and they're determined to convey the devastation that Tyrone has brought to their lives. And they hope that his sentence will be severe enough to reflect what he had done. We don't know what the outcome of Tyrone's sentence will be, but sometimes I think that things have to start from day one in a child's life, boys and girls. And I may get some crap for saying that. I'm not a boy mom, so I really have no experience with that. But I did watch my mom raise a respectful, smart, kind brother, and I watched how she was not always expecting him to be tough all the time, sharing that we have emotions, letting him show those. I'm not saying whether that's right or wrong, but I think the fact that she would show him, like, you have 3 older sisters to watch over and to protect, even though he was the younger one. And also that hitting and being physical with women is not acceptable at all, ever. No one is perfect. No parent is perfect either. We can try our best and things can still turn out the opposite. I get that. I really do. But I do think it starts at home, even with good examples, with the way that we treat each other and the way that we treat others, and teaching our daughters what's okay and what's not okay. Because I think some people are afraid to do that.
It's heartbreaking how victims of DV become tragic symbols of a cause that society seems unable to fix. Like, each tragedy sparks a momentary outrage and promises of change, and yet too often the momentum fades until another life is lost.
And I do think we also have to have reforms, but I don't know if any of them will work. We've talked about some of the things we mentioned in this video, like having some kind of monitoring system. But then you made a point, how long does a state have to pay for like tracking a person? And how would you for violent offenders? Or, we would love to get your thoughts on this in the comments, because it does feel like, and I know there's going to be a plethora of different perspectives, because some of you have been in these situations. You've been the victim. I know others have witnessed someone in their family or someone close to them going through this, or maybe even know someone that's committed a crime like this. But just remember, please be kind and respectful, because I do want to foster a place where we can feel safe to agree to disagree. But it does seem like nothing helps, because we do hear about these cases and then there is an outrage, but then it happens again. Because a piece of paper, like a restraining order, it really doesn't do that much. It's like after the fact, we're like, oh, they have a restraining order.
Should be a chip that's injected into your body.
That's what you said.
Mm-hmm.
And it would let the victim know, like, oh, he's close to you. But that's a lot. That's very invasive. But then I'm like, no, you're a criminal.
I don't think it's that much.
So it's really not that invasive. It's like, too bad. This is what you have to have.
There's one piece of technology that just gets printed over and over. It doesn't matter who you are. It's saying, oh, you have this in you, and you have a signal that goes to your phone. It seems pretty cheap. I don't know.
Well, give us your thoughts in the comments. Okay, so now switching gears to our very last case. Picture yourself standing on the edge of the world where paradise meets peril. Beneath your feet, the narrow dirt trail crumbles with each step, and in front of you, the vast blue ocean stretches endlessly. It's beautiful, yet it can be hiding violent waves that crash against the cliffs nearly 1,000 feet below you. It's breathtaking, but it's also terrifying. You came here to celebrate, to mark another year of life with a person who promised to love and protect you. He smiles, pulling out his phone to snap a memory, a simple birthday selfie on this idyllic cliffside trail in Hawaii. But something feels off. There's tension in his voice as he tells you to move closer to the cliff's edge, and your heart starts beating faster. And every instinct tells you to stay back, to turn away, not to go any further. But he tells you, come on, just get a little closer. With irritation now growing in his voice, your refusal sparks a rage you've only glimpsed in the dark, in your private moments. And suddenly he grabs your arms and he pulls you violently towards the cliff's edge. You're fighting, you're screaming into the wind, you're desperately trying not to be thrown over. And he's screaming back. His face is now unrecognizable. And he says, I'm so sick of you. In that terrifying split second, you realize what's going on. This isn't an accident, but he's trying to make it look like one. Here at the edge of paradise, the man who vowed to cherish you forever was about to throw you to your death. Now, it sounds like fiction. It sounds completely made up, but this was a real moment for Ariel Konig's life when she knew she was fighting for more than just survival. She was fighting against betrayal, violence, and a horrific secret that was hiding beneath a seemingly perfect marriage. The rugged beauty of Oahu's Nahu Pali outlook usually drew in hikers, tourists, and couples seeking that perfect romantic selfie. On March 24th, 2025, however, the peaceful mountainside was abruptly shattered by screams echoing across the ridge. Two women hiking nearby froze at the sound. It was a desperate cry for help, and it cut right through the Hawaiian breeze. For a moment, they wondered if someone had slipped from the notoriously dangerous trail. Their hearts were racing as they ran towards the screams, navigating the treacherous path until the horrifying scene appeared before them. On the edge of the sheer cliff, a woman, later identified as Ariel Konig, struggled frantically against a man pinning her to the ground. His arms were raised violently, and blood was streaking across her face. Dirt and grass was tangled in her hair as she desperately clawed and kicked, fighting to get away. The man above her showed no hesitation, only brutal, chilling determination.
The two hikers, seeing how serious things were, started shouting at the guy to stop. He actually froze for a second, looking over at them, breathing heavily. And in that tiny window, Ariel managed to break free, stumbling toward the women, her voice all shaky and desperate as she cried out, "He's trying to kill me." One hiker quickly dialed 911, while the other wrapped an arm around Ariel, shielding her from any further harm. As Ariel's bloodied body shook in her arms, the attacker vanished into the dense foliage, scrambling down the rugged mountainside. And within minutes, the Honolulu police arrived at the scene, alerted by multiple frantic calls. First responders found Ariel collapsed and trembling, her face badly injured, her head gashed, and her hand crushed. Paramedics worked rapidly to stabilize her before rushing her to Queens Medical Center in critical condition.
The police immediately began a manhunt for the man who had done this. It was Ariel's husband, Dr. Gerhardt Konig, who went by Jerry. Helicopters scanned the ridges while search teams combed through the thick brush and the undergrowth. It wasn't until nearly 6 hours later, around 6:10 p.m., that officers finally spotted him, bloodied, disoriented, and exhausted, emerging from the wilderness near an old side road. He was approached by officers, and Jerry made no attempt to hide his condition or flee again. His hiking clothes that were stained with dark red told the chilling story without him having to say a word. He was swiftly arrested, handcuffed, and placed into a patrol car, and charged initially with attempted murder in the second degree, a crime that carried a mandatory life sentence if convicted.
In police custody, Jerry remained silent, refusing to elaborate immediately, but evidence at the scene had already painted a hauntingly clear picture. Investigators recovered 2 syringes filled with an unknown substance, syringes that Ariel had bravely knocked out of his hands during the struggle. Near the cliff's edge lay a bloodied rock, the weapon he had allegedly used to strike Ariel repeatedly, fracturing bones and tearing flesh in her head and face.
My first thought when I heard the syringes was, what is it called? Succinylcholine, from that Valentine's Day case we did. And as Ariel lay in their hospital bed fighting to survive her injuries, detectives pieced together what was emerging as a horrifying premeditated attack. But the most shocking revelation of all came hours after his arrest. Jerry had apparently made a desperate FaceTime call while fleeing. And in that call, seen by his adult son from a previous marriage, he uttered a chilling confession. He told him, "I just tried to kill Ari, but she got away."
Wow.
Yeah. And he threatened to take his own life at this point, hinting that he would jump off another cliffside rather than face justice. Ultimately, he never carried out that threat. He was apprehended alive. And I know that some of you may have seen this case in the media. I decided to write about it before it started really blowing up, but that gave me another chance to really find out more because more has been uncovered.
And because it was so shocking, the details spread from Hawaii to Pennsylvania, where they're from. Headlines were everywhere, talking about betrayal, brutality, and this picture-perfect marriage that was really hiding these dark, terrifying secrets. Friends, neighbors, coworkers, even the whole medical community, everyone was left asking the same chilling question. How could a respected doctor, a father, a husband, someone who took an oath to heal people, do something so horrifying?
It is surprising, and it is interesting. Somebody got on my case in one of our last videos because I mentioned that looks can be deceiving. I specifically mentioned that someone didn't look like they were capable of such a crime. But that's an actual thing. Like, looks can be deceiving is a cliche, but it's also real because it's scary. It's that quiet, unassuming person, and then they commit a heinous crime. And it's what makes us drop our jaw. I don't think that makes me stupid because I look at someone and their physical appearance, because that's kind of what they were saying. They were like, how of all people that you do true crime and you're still thinking looks are, and I'm like, no, that's the point. That's why it's so shocking.
And then they have never judge a book by its cover.
Right. And we wouldn't. I am quite aware that we can't judge people by their looks, but it's still really shocking when we find a case like this where everything seems so perfect. And as Ariel slowly regained strength in the hospital, the court prepared for a criminal trial unlike anything seen before in this part of Hawaii. The investigation into Dr. Konig's terrifying attack was just the beginning. The darkness hidden behind his carefully constructed image was about to unravel because from the outside, Dr. Gerhardt Jerry Konig had it all: a successful medical career, an impressive home, a devoted wife, and a growing family. To his colleagues, patients, and neighbors, he appeared as a textbook example of professional and personal achievement, a man who had figured life out. But masks often hide the darkest secrets. Jerry Konig's life started far from scandal. He was born in 1979, I believe in South Africa, from what I could find on his Facebook page. And Jerry was always bright, ambitious, and meticulous. He thrived academically, eventually moving to the US and studying bioengineering at UC San Diego before enrolling at the prestigious University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine.
Soon after graduating, he landed this well-respected job at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center and pretty quickly built a name for himself as a really skilled anesthesiologist. He had a precision in the operating room that made people feel safe. Patients genuinely trusted him to guide them through that fine line between being awake and under anesthesia. Outside of his clinical work, he was thriving in academia as well, spending almost 7 years as an assistant professor of anesthesiology and bioengineering. He even co-authored scholarly papers and got a lot of recognition from his peers. It looked like his career was perfectly on track, like everything was planned out and going just right.
Jerry had married his first wife, the love of his life, Jessica Patella, who ended up becoming a sex worker after their split and now goes by the name Jessie Sage. She's a writer for various publications, including The Rolling Stone, where she talks about being a sex worker, relationships, and more. And in one of those articles on Pittsburgh City Paper, she said about her relationship with Jerry, quote, "I met my first husband at 17 and fell in love so hard that for the first couple of years of our relationship, I had to remind myself to breathe when he walked into the room. We married when we were 20, we had 2 kids before age 30, and stayed together until we were 36. It was an intense and all-consuming relationship, first love energy that lasted nearly 2 decades, end quote. But in 2014, Jessie quietly filed for divorce and later gained custody of their 2 children, who in 2025 are now 22 and 19, but they were only 11 and 5 years old at the time. Jessie also shared with the readers that because Jerry retained their lavish home in Mount Lebanon, a comfortable Pittsburgh suburb, she had to move into a small apartment not too far from the home that they owned together. She said, quote, "I was emotionally exhausted. We split as hard as we came together. I swore I would never get married again," end quote. So it sounds like they had a pretty intense split. But I mean, any divorce is intense, especially with kids and being married as long as they were.
The split seemed pretty amicable, at least from the outside, and they both seemed to move on pretty fast. Just a few months later, Jessie mentioned she already had a new partner, and within a year, she got married again. She admitted part of that was because the divorce had hit her financially hard. Eventually, she and her new husband both got into sex work, and they actually were really open about it, doing a podcast together where they talked about their experiences. Their relationship went through a lot. Her partner came out as non-binary, she left her PhD program to become a writer, and one of their kids struggled a lot with mental health. They had a baby who was diagnosed with autism, and her partner went through cancer treatments twice, almost dying the second time. And now they've actually separated. And Jessie writes about all of it online, not as she says to air her dirty laundry, but to show that they're not the same people they were when they first got together.
And apparently her ex-husband isn't the same person he was in their past relationship either. It was a couple years later, around 2016, when Jerry met Ariel Worthington. She was young, brilliant, and accomplished with a degree in nuclear engineering from Penn State. At Westinghouse Electric Company, she was a rising star, a career woman in her own right. Friends and family saw Jerry and Ariel as the perfect power couple, 2 intelligent professionals thriving in their respective fields. Their Facebook pictures showed them posing in front of a Christmas tree in December of that year. And then the next year, on December 7th of 2017, they were engaged, sharing a photo together with Ariel's shiny new ring, and it brought in tons of comments from friends and family. Everyone was so happy for them, saying things like congrats, and others saying things like too many happy years together. And then on September 4th of 2018, the couple married in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania. Jerry was 40 and Ariel was about 30 at the time. The wedding photos captured their bright smiles, their joyful embraces, and their loving glances, images that felt genuine. Jerry even captioned their wedding photo with, "Best day ever," a phrase that radiated sincerity and hope for their future. And from the looks of it, they were a picture-perfect couple, posing with their big family who came together to celebrate their love. And Ariel captioned that picture, "The most fun wine-tasting crew." The following years appeared to be equally joyful. They welcomed 2 young sons into the family in quick succession, completing the image of domestic bliss. Neighbors described the Konigs as friendly, polite, and warm. They admired how Jerry and Ariel balanced demanding careers and active parenthood, seemingly without strain.
But in late 2022, Jerry made a pivotal decision. He accepted a position with the Anesthesia Medical Group in Maui, Hawaii, fulfilling what he had described to his friends as his dream opportunity. The decision seemed natural enough, a career progression, a chance for his family to experience island paradise, and Ariel embraced this move enthusiastically, landing a new remote role with Terra Power, a nuclear innovation firm connected to Bill Gates. It was a significant professional opportunity for her, too. In November of 2022, Jerry sold their Mount Lebanon home for $1.3 million, packed up their belongings, and moved the family over 4,700 miles away to Maui. It was a new chapter filled with possibility, yet beneath this exciting surface, subtle cracks started forming.
But to outsiders, everything still appeared fine. So back on Maui and in Pennsylvania, friends, neighbors, and former colleagues would soon receive news that shattered that carefully constructed image that Dr. Konig had created. How could this mild-mannered anesthesiologist, devoted father, and respected researcher have become a subject of a violent arrest on charges of attempted murder? As Ariel was laying there hospitalized, her injuries were severe, and Jerry sat locked in a Honolulu jail cell. The entire facade had just collapsed. For Ariel, the mask had clearly come off way too late. But the thing about red flags is they don't always just appear right away. They can creep in very quietly, very subtly. And at first, you might dismiss them as maybe a misunderstanding or an overreaction. And sometimes they masquerade as harmless acts of love or jealousy, mistaken for devotion, control disguised as protection. But by the time they become undeniable, you're already deeply entangled in a nightmare. And in late 2024, around Christmas, something shifted dramatically inside Jerry. Without any concrete reason, he became obsessed with a single accusation. He believed that Ariel was cheating on him, and she assumed it was just a harmless misunderstanding.
She kept reassuring him, hoping that the paranoia would pass, but Jerry's suspicions persisted. He began closely monitoring her phone and computer, checking her messages, questioning her interactions with male coworkers. Ariel was fiercely loyal and busy juggling her high-level job and motherhood. She had never given him any reason to doubt her, and the accusations felt unfounded, almost absurd. Still, she tried to be patient, believing it was just stress from work or adjusting to their new life in Hawaii. Yet Jerry's accusations morphed quickly into something far worse. Ariel described in court filings how around this period, Jerry became increasingly controlling. He'd insist on knowing exactly where she was at every moment. He isolated her subtly at first, but more aggressively as the weeks went by. Ariel felt trapped, walking on eggshells, desperately avoiding anything that might trigger Jerry's suspicion or anger.
Then behind the polished facade of their upscale Maui home, hidden from the prying eyes, Jerry's behavior darkened even further. He began making degrading comments. He would belittle Ariel, calling her names when no one was around, and his paranoia and anger gradually spilled into physical intimidation. It was subtle at first, maybe standing too close, gripping her arm a little too tightly during arguments, and then his presence became a menacing shadow that she could no longer ignore. But the most disturbing change was Jerry's increasing aggression when no one was watching, or he thought that no one was. According to Ariel's later testimony, Jerry began to commit SA on her, violating boundaries that she set, and he would ignore her protests to stop. These attacks marked a significant turning point. Jerry was no longer just controlling, but he was now mistreating her. Ariel was shocked and she was frightened, and she was struggling to reconcile this darker version of the man that she had married. But she kept silent, and she was still holding on to hope. She suggested couples counseling in late 2024, hoping that maybe someone from the outside and their perspective could help Jerry regain control over what he was doing. But they attended the sessions, and Jerry was playing the charming, remorseful husband, the one he played to the outside world as well. And it appeared that they were actively working to try to mend their marriage. Yet in private, his behavior persisted. The family's longtime housekeeper, Christina Ferguson, who cleaned their Maui home regularly, would later recall small but troubling things that she remembered. Looking back, she noticed subtle tension in Ariel's behavior in early 2025. Quiet anxiety, unease that Ariel quickly masked with a polite smile. So, she'd be like, something wrong? And then she would kind of just be like, it's okay. But Ferguson just dismissed these feelings initially because the Konigs were always really polite. They seemed like the perfect couple. It was only later that Ferguson wondered if Ariel's quiet demeanor was hiding something and that it was a cry for help.
Similarly, neighbors in Pittsburgh had seen nothing but the model family. But behind the Instagram perfect snapshots of family trips, smiling photos at local events, and casual conversations by the mailbox, Ariel was quietly enduring an escalating nightmare. In early 2025, Jerry made plans for Ariel's birthday. It would be a weekend trip away to Oahu without their young children, a rare chance for the couple to reconnect. Ariel, cautious but hopeful, agreed to the trip, believing that Jerry might genuinely be trying to mend their damaged marriage. But as the day approached, Jerry insisted on hiking on a trail that he had chosen himself, the Palipuka Trail, an infamous route officially closed due to extreme danger and steep cliffs. Ariel likely had no idea of its closure or just how perilous the terrain was, but Jerry seemed confident, even enthusiastic. She trusted him enough to agree, but privately, friends would later say that she mentioned feeling uneasy. It felt off somehow, too insistent and too specific.
Yeah, he was like, no, let's go down this trail. And the truth would become horrifyingly clear. Jerry had chosen that hike deliberately. It wasn't a spontaneous celebration. It was a meticulously planned act of betrayal and violence. He carried with him syringes filled with an unknown substance, deadly tools concealed in his backpack, betraying his medical oath in the most chilling way possible. He selected this isolated trail, closed to the public, probably believing it would provide him the perfect opportunity with no witnesses and no interruptions, no one to hear Ariel's screams. And that's when we get back to March 24th of 2025. Standing near the cliff's edge, Ariel was hesitant. She was refusing to move any closer for the supposed selfie because he was like, come on, get in. Let's take a photo together on this edge. I mean, with everything they already went through, that's why she was already suspicious.
Right.
So when she refused to take this picture, he just exploded into a rage of physical violence. He pushed her towards this 1,000-foot drop. And he was screaming, get back over here. I'm sick of you. Can you believe that? And people heard this that was around them. And she was fighting desperately to get away. And that's when he picked up a rock nearby, grabbed those syringes filled with who knows what, and tried to prick her with them and then hit her over the head with a rock. He was probably trying to sedate her and then push her over the edge, looking like it was an accident.
Exactly.
Oh, that is just, it's disgusting and it's terrifying at the same time because can you imagine? He even grabbed her by the back of the head and slammed her face into the ground repeatedly. Ariel bravely knocked the syringes away. She was screaming for help, and we told you there were witnesses. They saw Jerry run off. They saw him bash Ariel over the head and in the face with a rock, and they heard her screams. And that's when a manhunt began to track him down.
Meanwhile, when the police arrived at the Palipuka trailhead that day, they didn't just respond to an attack. They walked into a meticulously staged attempted murder. The scene didn't lie. Blood was pooled in the dirt, streaked across the foliage, and soaked into Ariel Konig's torn clothing. Ariel was found barely able to speak, bleeding heavily from her face and head. Paramedics were stunned by the severity of her injuries. Multiple lacerations across her scalp, deep bruising, and facial fractures. One of her thumbs had been crushed. She told officers that Jerry had smashed it with a rock. Despite the pain she was in, she was lucid enough to tell the first responders what had happened. Between sobs and her heavy breathing, she relayed how her husband, the man she had trusted with her life, had tried to kill her. First by pushing her off a cliff, and then by beating her, then by attempting to inject her with something. The investigators moved quickly to cordon off the trail and began to investigate, and first they discovered a large rock soaked in blood, the makeshift weapon that Jerry allegedly used to strike Ariel in the head. The sheer weight of it and the blood-spattered pattern made it clear this wasn't a panicked shove or a single hit. It was violent and sustained.
Then in the bushes, just a few feet from the trail's edge, they found 2 hypodermic syringes. One of them was broken from the struggle. These weren't ordinary syringes. They were medical grade, something that was probably taken from Jerry's professional supply. While the contents were unknown at the time, authorities suspected this was some kind of agent to paralyze a person. And Ariel later said that she didn't know exactly what was in them, but the fact that she was the wife of an anesthesiologist, she understood enough to know that it could kill her. The implication was chilling, that Jerry had came there prepared. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment reaction. He didn't just snap. He packed syringes on a hike that he chose on a closed trail, far from other people. He waited until they were at the most dangerous point of the hike to act. That's not rage. That was planning. And Ariel might not have survived if it weren't for those 2 hikers nearby that heard her screaming. When the women helped her, they asked her, "Are you safe now?" And she responded with, "He tried to kill me." So right away, she was telling them what happened. I mean, they could kind of see it. It was kind of clear what was going on, but I'm sure they didn't know the details. They didn't know, like,
oh, no.
that was
Who
your
was that
husband.
person?
Right.
Yeah.
They were just like, wow, a psycho came up here and did this.
Both hikers gave statements to the police. In them, they described seeing a man later confirmed to be Jerry physically attacking Ariel. They saw blood, they heard screaming, they saw her fight like hell to escape. But perhaps the most damning piece of evidence didn't come from the trail, it came from Jerry himself. While he was on the run that day, hiding somewhere in the Oahu Mountains, Jerry made a phone call. Not just a phone call, a FaceTime.
Yeah, we told you about this call. We're going to give you a little more details of how it went down.
He contacted his adult son from his first marriage. When the son picked up, he was reportedly horrified. Jerry was disheveled, sweating, and covered in blood. And then, according to what Ariel later included in her restraining order affidavit, Jerry confessed, "I just tried to kill Ari, but she got away." He said it like it was a fact. No hesitation, no remorse.
Right. So as he's running away, the son saw this. Like, he saw the state that his father was in at the time. And police believe that this was a critical moment, not just a confession, but a sign of Jerry's unraveling. Because why would you even do that? This phone call would later become pivotal to this case. And if the son will confirm this in court, it would serve as a direct admission. Voluntary, unsolicited, and made while fleeing the scene.
Photos taken at the moment of arrest show Jerry slumped, dazed, and perhaps realizing that his plan, whatever it was, had failed.
I could imagine he was pretty shocked.
Right.
Like, maybe he thought, oh, I planned this out so well. Like, this is going to go smoothly. I don't know how you could think that, taking somebody's life, but it seemed like he was almost defeated.
Right, and the fact that you called your son and said, "I tried to kill her, but she got away." Like, what?
That's why this case got so much attention, because it's weird. And back at the Queens Medical Center, Ariel was recovering and her condition was upgraded from critical to stable, but her injuries were significant. The full list was brutal: blunt force trauma to the head, facial lacerations requiring stitches, a fractured orbital bone, a broken thumb crushed by the rock, and signs of attempted injection near her shoulder and her arm, defensive wounds on her hands and her forearms, and forensic testing would later confirm her blood was on that rock and on Jerry's clothing. The syringes are still undergoing toxicology because this just happened. I'm very interested to know what was in them, but prosecutors were already preparing their case. Investigators also noted a visible human bite mark on Jerry's forearm because Ariel had bitten him during the fight. Every injury, every trail of blood, every statement lined up. Ariel's story didn't just sound believable, it was backed up by evidence. In the days that followed, Ariel filed for a restraining order from her hospital bed. And in her affidavit, like you had mentioned, she recounted all of this, everything about the attack. And she laid out all the truth about their marriage, the emotional manipulation, the jealousy, the isolation, the essay that began in the months leading up to this trip. And she said, "I am fearful that if Gerhardt is released from custody, he will return to Maui and attempt to harm or kill me, as well as harm or kill our children or other family members."
The judge granted the order immediately. Jerry would not be allowed to contact Ariel or the sons. Not now, not during the trial, and not ever, unless the court said otherwise. As the investigation continued, more details surfaced about Jerry's life, about the marriage, about the image he projected, about the depths of his calculated violence.
And it didn't take long for the headlines to explode, which I said this was a crazy case. So there were headlines like respected Maui doctor arrested for attempted murder, wife alleges husband tried to push her off a cliff, bludgeon her and inject her, doctor monster, and real life Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Given the gravity of the charges, a preliminary bail was set at $5 million, but prosecutors made it clear they didn't want him out, period.
The next day, prosecutors presented the case to the Oahu grand jury. The evidence was overwhelming. Photographs of Ariel's injuries, blood on Jerry's clothing, the syringes found on the trail, witness accounts, and the most damning of all, Jerry's alleged FaceTime confession to his own son. It took the grand jury less than a day to return an indictment, one count of attempted murder in the second degree. This meant the case was no longer a police matter. It was moving to the circuit court. Formal felony prosecution, high-stakes litigation, a potential life sentence. At this point, the court revoked bail entirely. Jerry would remain behind bars at the Oahu Community Correctional Center until his trial.
Jerry's defense attorney, Thomas Otake, immediately promised to file a motion for bail reconsideration, claiming that his client had no prior criminal record, imposed no flight risk, and had deep ties to the community. Wearing his prison jumpsuit and appearing via video from jail, Dr. Gerhardt Konig stood before the court. It was time for him to enter a plea, and you can guess what it was.
Not guilty.
Exactly. Outside the courtroom, Jerry's attorney gave a statement to the press. This plea is not just formality, but a substantive response to the allegation. There are two sides to every story. And that line, two sides every story, set off a lot of alarm bells. Was he going to try to say that Ariel was the aggressor? We don't know. Was he going to deny bringing the syringes to the trail? He maybe claimed the attack wasn't premeditated and insist that he never said what he said on FaceTime. So far, there aren't any criminal records prior to this act. However, per lawsuit records, Jerry suffered a prior head injury in 2019. He had a concussion in his home. It was just an accident. And some are saying that maybe that shifted something in his mind.
Within days of the indictment, Maui Memorial Medical Center suspended Dr. Konig's staff privileges. His employer, the Anesthesia Medical Group, placed him on an indefinite leave. Behind the scenes, whispers swirled through the medical community. Colleagues were stunned. Administrators scrambled to check every surgery and anesthetic procedure Jerry had touched. The Hawaii Medical Board confirmed that his license was still technically active and in good standing, but emphasized that disciplinary action was pending based on the criminal case. In other words, professionally, Jerry was done.
His career wasn't just paused, it was essentially over.
And at home, his life was falling apart even faster. Ariel had full legal custody of their sons, a protective order banning Jerry from all contact. Divorce was likely inevitable. Everything he had built, family, career, reputation, was gone.
It's just crazy. It's like another one of those cases where we're like, he clearly wanted a divorce. He clearly wanted a way. So why do this?
I don't know. Just get the divorce.
I know, but his next court date is June 9th. So we will have an update. But it's just shocking because people that lived next door to him for years, they thought they were really good neighbors and they were totally surprised by these allegations. They were like, oh my God, they were so friendly. There was this one guy who told the media, I would see him doing his yard work. I would see him with his little boys. And I thought he was a great dad. A great husband. He had no idea. He'd never even seen him be violent ever. This is a man who puts people to sleep for a living and is like, if you've ever had an anesthesiologist, they're usually like so nice and calm and, your life is in their hands. And to think that he would do something like this is just shocking.
This is what you were saying earlier about, I can't believe he would appear he would look like he's not capable of doing something like this.
Exactly. And a lot of people said things like this isn't the Jerry that we remember. And obviously everything is alleged at this point. In these cases that haven't gone to trial, we don't know the truth or the full story. But I think it's clear he didn't want to be married anymore. And it's probably like what we've seen in other cases where maybe in his first marriage, you heard his ex-wife. Yeah. She was in financial ruin, essentially. She had to live in a small apartment. There were ways for him to have more of the benefits. But maybe with Ariel and him being more equal.
He didn't want to pay a dime.
He didn't want to pay. And he thought, oh my gosh, she's going to get everything. And I'm going to be left having to pay her for years and years to come. Because I think their boys are only 4 and 2 years old.
Oh, wow.
Well, we will keep you updated on any of these cases. And like I said, we do have some membership opportunities coming up where we can give you more up-to-date things in the moment anytime we want to. So we would love for you to sign up for that when it does open up. And if it is, you'll see the little join button on our profile. But we thank you so much for being here for these stories today. Again, shocking, again, unbelievable. And we hope you like this new series. You can give us our thoughts as always. And next week, we will come back with another deep dive.
And make sure to sign the petition if it speaks to you.
Exactly. Always look in the description box there. We might have some GoFundMe links or other things you can do to take action. We will see you in our next video. Bye.